right, guys, this is an incredibly exciting day for us here at Rhino Adventure Gear. For those of you guys that follow Shauno and Graham out of Australia that do some incredible wheeling, this is the type of stuff that I stay up late at night watching when I can't go to sleep or when I don't want to go to sleep. These are the guys I've been watching. So we met Shauno. I think he came up to one of our booths at one of the shows looking at Chris's 80. We had no idea those guys are around, let alone even in the United States. And there he is, right? So, of course, super excited. We got the opportunity to hang out with those guys, talk trucks, so on and so forth. Fast forward a little bit, I get an email, it's probably like a year and a half later, saying, hey, we're gonna be doing our filming here. The crew's coming out. We need a place to keep the Dirty 30. Obviously, we rose our hands and said, absolutely, we've got a beautiful home here at Rhino to hold the Dirty 30. So lo and behold, we've got it here. Shauno's on his way momentarily to come pick it up, but before he does that, we're gonna take a look around because this is the ultimate Land Cruiser. It is the Land Cruiser of Land Cruisers. I've seen this thing up on my computer screen so many different times, doing so many awesome things that I'm really excited to kind of go over it real briefly with you guys before he comes to pick it up. As you guys probably know, this is the Dirty 30. Well, why in the world is it called a Dirty 30? A couple things about this Land Cruiser. I mentioned earlier, it is the Land Cruiser of Land Cruiser. Why? Because it is literally multiple different Land Cruisers all put together. The frame originally started, or the car originally started as a FJ60, a 60 series Land Cruiser, right? You can tell just kind of by the front end, but it was chopped. It was chopped. It was made into a ute tray kind of format, classic Australian formatting. 60, kind of cut in half, 30, hence the Dirty 30. Dirty, well, I'm pretty sure Shauno gets it pretty damn dirty, right? So that's the name behind it. I've always kind of wondered, what is that? That's where that comes from. The motor, and we'll get into that a little bit, it's from a 100 series. The transmission is from a 100 series Land Cruiser. Axles, suspension, that's all 80 series, right? So a little bit of a Frankenstein of all the different Land Cruisers. I would probably argue all the best things of all those Land Cruisers all mashed up into this awesome format. I mentioned Dirty 30, it is chopped. If you take a look at it, right, if you take the side profile of the vehicle, it is quite a bit shorter. It's a shorter wheelbase, maybe not as short as like a JL or a JK, but it is definitely quite a bit shorter than a traditional 60 series Land Cruiser. Obviously, Shauno and the guys out in Australia, they do a lot of serious wheeling. I'd probably call it more off-road focused than overlanding, which is what we kind of tend to do here at Rhino. So that short wheelbase really kind of helps in those conditions, right? I'd argue of the Land Cruisers that have been out, the 80 series is probably the most capable four-wheel drive Land Cruiser out there. Sure, the 200's got a lot of technology. The new 300 looks super interesting. The 100's been proven. The 60 is legendary. The 40, well, I'm a little biased to the 40. The 40 is pretty rad. But the 80 is really hard to beat. So these guys took all of the suspension components of an 80 series Land Cruiser and bolted that up to the bottom of the 60. The 60 looks, it's classic. Classic kind of, you know, sort of in that era of the original SUVs, right? In that mid 80s. And it just looks awesome, right? Just that look, that boxy look. It has that classic Land Cruiser look. Knowing that it has the 80 series suspension underneath, oh my God, it just makes you go nuts, right? So pretty unique. Obviously, a lot of custom work has been done to get what would normally be, you know, another door and the wagon chopped, ute tray. You know, they're running a Mitts alloy now. I know they've run a couple of the other trays in the past, the BMW before, but a really nice profile. When you drive the car, it's got a nice wide stance. It feels very planted, but it's got that short wheelbase. For instance, you know, Tacoma 200 series, much longer wheelbase. So that's clearly proven to be very effective for him in conditions that they find themselves wheeling. All right, up front, obviously we've got the classic Australian bar work, as they call it. We call it, you know, body armor bumpers. He's running a set of the steady lights. Incredible. He's got 4 more of them, kind of, as he calls it, pre-runner style. I think he did that specifically for the US here. Don't worry, Shauno, we're gonna love you either way. Looks real good. He's got his, I think they use a VHF antenna mount up here. Again, classic Australian. We would normally have this on this side. Obviously, they're right-hand drive, we're left-hand drive, right? The Runva winch, all kind of, you know, standard equipment. Tires, he's running a 15-inch rim and the Goodyear Wrangler MT tires, right? They're in the 35-inch size. I know, so I think in Australia they keep that, to get to a 37, they've got quite a bit more governmental requirements in terms of getting things certified. We're lucky here in the US that we can modify our vehicles. Obviously, we want to do it safely and correctly with the right equipment, but we don't have to go to the DMV to get that recertified. In Australia, you do. They do a really good job about maintaining proper weight specs and things like lift kits, so on and so forth. My understanding, and I may not be totally right about this, is that 37s over there would have required him to go through this whole process. The other thing is, I think the 35s just work on this truck. Again, if you guys go check out the channel, it doesn't look like he's having a whole lot of trouble getting through some really extreme terrain. So there was some talk about maybe getting the 37s on here, for all the trails that they're going to be running in the US, but they kept the 35s. I'm secretly really excited about that because for me, it kind of gives an apples to apples comparison. The truck in Australia on 35s, kitted out as it is, running those trails. The truck on 35s here in the US running our US trails, right? I think this truck is going to absolutely have no problems running everything that they plan to run. That's my opinion, but it'll be really fun to check out. Again, steady aftermarket headlights, gives him a tremendous amount of lighting power. Suspension-wise, I think he's got 3-inch resi suspension front and rear. Obviously, the integrated sliders as well. So I mentioned a little bit that this vehicle is really built to run some of the toughest tracks out in Australia. Unlike a lot of the cars that you see coming out of our shop with the tents, right now he's elected not to have a tent. The 3030's definitely had different various hardshell rooftop tents on it on various different trips, but right now he's not. They just changed out the back end to a MITS alloy tray, a ute tray. Again, very classic Australia styling. We don't see much of that here. It's got a very utilitarian use profile to it. You'll see a lot of that maybe in different parts of the country here in the US where you're doing a little bit more farm work, agricultural work. Having a flatbed as a base and then the tray on top can be very effective in kind of, like I said, ag work or farm work or just where you need a bed of a truck. And I think they see that a lot in Australia, and that's kind of morphed into the 4x4 world. We don't see as much of it here, but it is a really nice piece of kit. He's got a half tray, right? So the back is still open. He's got a spare tire back here. You can put a bunch of stuff back here. Presumably, if it gets dirty, it doesn't matter. Easy to kind of throw in and out. 2 big doors and a couple of storage compartments. Up in here, he's gonna be running a Dometic fridge. He's got the Clearview Easy Slide. We hear about it all the time in Australia. This will come down, drop down. Full Red Arc battery management system, right? I think he has maybe 200 amp hours of battery, new Red Arc lithium batteries in here. He's running the Manager 30 system in here, full solar, full inverter. Love the Red Arc stuff. You guys see it in our trucks all the time and installs all the time, so it's really fun to see it. The one thing that's different about that inverter in ours is that's running, 210, and we're running, 110, 120. So a lot of storage in here. Around back, again, this tray will open up. It's kind of like a tailgate, but it folds all the way down, but does give him just space to put stuff up here. He's got his big 35-inch tire sitting in here. That's nice. I think he's got an airline custom run back here. He's got a water spout that's coming out here with an on and off on a pump as well. Recovery points, real stout kind of, integrated to the chassis in terms of that rear hitch mount. Storage in here, these kind of behind the wheel well storage things are really great to keep recovery gear, particularly when it gets dirty, your gloves, maybe some of your tools, easy to access, isn't inside your cab getting really dirty. So I always like those. He's got one here, and up here as well, right? Up top, he's running I don't know how many watts it is, but it probably looks like a 150 watt rigid panel. I'm sure that's wired into the Red Arc system. I peeked in here, some spare parts. You never know. I presume there's going to be some spare parts here for the items that are unique to this truck and unique to the to the Australian market, meaning parts he wouldn't be able to get for the truck here in the US. I mentioned the 80 series suspension. Those parts are obviously readily available. A lot of people have have experience with the 80 series, and there's parts available, right? The motor, which we'll get to in a sec, is a little bit different. But anyways, parts in here. He's got his recovery gear in here. So tons of room to kind of work with in here, lights, so on and so forth. One of the things I know that's new to the truck, what Shauno's gotten a real kick out of, are the side lights, right? These are also from Steady. Camp lights. I'm not sure he's ever had those before, which kind of cracks me up, to be totally honest. It seems like that's like the thing we do here in America all the time. Camp lights, camp lights, camp lights. If you watch one of his latest videos, he talks about it and he's so stoked, which is awesome. Very nicely integrated into that rack. I mentioned the 4 other Steady lights up front. Classic Australian style snorkel. What is cool about these and different than what we do here in the US is you'll notice the intake is facing backwards. All our kind of ARB, which is Australian brand obviously, but has the intake facing forward. I do see folks running them backwards. It's just kind of interesting. This is really kind of a stout snorkel, which makes me think that it can take some abuse, because inevitably that car is going to be doing this and that. And if it gets bonked, it's not going to get any damage. So this thing's heavy. All right, so here's probably the part of the car. I mean, there's so many things about this car that makes me drool, but the motor, this is something we don't have, right? So I mentioned earlier, the motor comes out of a 100 series LandCruiser, and that isn't the V8 4.7 liter that we have here, gas motor in the US. This is the 1HD FTE motor with a supercharger on it, running 20 pounds of boost. What does that give them? It gives them about 220 horsepower, great. 700 Newton meters of torque. Converted into foot-pounds, that's over 500 pounds of torque at the wheels. Just driving that around, Shauno, I didn't drive it too much, but just driving around a bit, dude, the thing is an absolute beast. You can just tell if you get into a mud bog, sand, anything that needs the torque, my God, it is there, and it's there quickly. I understand the 20 pounds of torque obviously is not nothing. They probably could have boosted that a little bit more, but they wanted to keep the reliability of that Toyota motor, right? It does give me a lot of nostalgia. It is a true diesel. Would this thing pass California carb compliance? Absolutely not, would be my guess. It smells like my grandpa's old turbo diesel Mercedes, but the cool factor is absolutely through the roof. They mated that to an automatic transmission from 100 series as well. The motor originally was mated to a manual transmission. So the folks in Australia and the team, and again, Shauno's got some videos on all the players that were involved in getting this dialed in, but had to retune the ECU and things to get the shift points with the engine correct, so on and so forth. So some pretty cool stuff done to it. Driving around, it's pretty slick. Drives well, plenty of power. It's got that feel, like I said, that cool factor is just absolutely through the roof. One thing I'd point out, if we take a look at the motor as well, you can see the intercooler, the turbocharger's in here as well. I mentioned what they do in Australia in terms of having their equivalent of a DMV look over the vehicle. You'll see here, and I just noticed this, the Queensland government modification plate, and it has a cert number, so on and so forth. This is what I was talking about in terms of if Shauno wanted to run 37s in Australia, he would have to go and get this recertified and probably get another version of this or an updated version of something like that. So quite a bit different than what we're used to here in America. I know California is pretty strict, but nothing like that in terms of modifying the vehicle. So I'm feeling pretty good about, or pretty thankful about that. Elite Off-Road, I think, went through all the electrical components. You know, Shauno's truck, this truck is a true enthusiast truck. This is not a show pony truck. This doesn't sit at SEMA just to look good. This dude uses this truck all the time. inevitably, just like all of our trucks, you're going to go through and you're going to make modifications. You're going to add a radio, you're going to add a winch, you're going to add a compressor, you're going to add lockers, you're going to add lights, you're going to do all this stuff. I think over time and just using the truck, the electrical components and the wiring got a little disorganized. This got all cleaned up specifically for the trip here to the US. Shauno didn't want any sort of issues with electrical gremlins, which are the worst to try and track down on the trail. So it's all been cleaned up. Just looking at it, you know, we do a fair amount of electrical work. This looks really nice and clean and tight. The engine bay looks great. So super awesome. This, I'm not gonna lie, when we got the car, we drove it. It's a couple of the other things that I haven't mentioned yet, a little harder to see. Truck's obviously triple locked, right? So front rear lockers, those are air lockers. No surprise there. Obviously running the intercooler, I think I mentioned that. Upgraded brakes, I think they're the Bendix brakes, recently done. I believe he had updated the master cylinder, brake booster, so the truck does stop pretty nicely now. So again, a couple other things that are key to make this thing drivable and reliable. I think they went through the entire suspension components. I think they added a front sway bar that was missing, which is it gives the car a little bit more stability down the road, but also maybe on some of the off-camber stuff, it's not going to lift the wheel as violently as maybe it would before. God, this thing is just so cool. Just these huge, massive berths. The berth feels LandCruiser, and then LandCruiser knuckles. Pretty unique setup. So, all right. So sitting in here, obviously the biggest thing is I'm on the passenger side and I've got the steering wheel in front of me. It is pretty funky. I've driven manual cars, right-hand drive, and for whatever reason that feels more natural shifting. It's weird to have the automatic just over here on my left hand. That's nothing unique to the vehicle, but it is kind of funny it makes the car feel that much more special. Again, transmission from the 100 series, you can tell just by the knob, even the kind of surrounding plate, it's like the shift plate we see on all the 100 series that come in. You can see all his switching for his driving lights, his front and rear lockers, the compressors, fan, winch lights. This is the eject button. I'm not sure what that is. The old school 60 series kind of pitch and roll chart. Love that. That's super rad. Some red arc gauges here. I think one of them is showing turbo boost. Maybe the other one's temperature. I'm not entirely sure. Custom kind of, I don't know what to call this other than like a trucker's vault. His radio's tucked up in here. Sunglasses, whatever, right? Everything's in here. So back here, he's got the extra Red Arc Manager 30 display, right? I believe this is powering some of the side lights. All that's coming in here. I believe there's an air compressor back here as well. Some Alpine equipment for the tunes. So pretty cool. It's a small cockpit, right? It's just a two-door setup. Pretty comfortable to drive. Everything else is pretty straightforward. Love this. Dual gas tank gauges, one for the sub tank and one for the regular tank as well. Coastline Automotive transmission. That's the folks that did this. That's right. Hey, Shauno, you got to come in at 266,000 kilometers or by the middle of November. I'm not sure if we're going to get your truck back by then. So anyways, that's what's coming in here. Super rad. What a cool truck. All right, guys, so there you have it. That is the Dirty 30 all the way from Australia. We're super psyched to have had this. We're super pumped for Shauno to come pick it up. Actually, that's a lie. I'd rather he not come and pick it up and that we just keep it, but that's not gonna happen. So this is probably the next best thing. What a cool rig. For you guys that don't follow 4-wheel drive 24/7, go give them a follow. These guys are all time. Thanks so much.